Hello and welcome back to another beginners tutorial. Today we are looking at Flexbox. Okay, so in the next few minutes I'm going to introduce you to the secret to modern web layouts that most of the pros you see use on a daily basis. Okay, so whether you want to design an entire web page or you want to make your web page mobile friendly, Flexbox will make your web development process much easier and faster. Okay, here is the best part: you don't have to be a coding genius or have years of experience, okay, to be able to write Flexbox. By the end of this course, you would understand Flexbox and master it with a real world example. So we'll start off by laying the foundational concept in Flexbox, and then we'll move on to our code editor and start writing our very first Flexbox code. Okay, now let's look at what Flexbox is. Okay, so before we start, we want to look at the foundation. And Flexbox, also known as the flexible box layout, is a CSS layout or CSS layout model that provides a more efficient way to align and distribute space among items in containers. Okay, so even when these items have varying sizes, it is designed to handle this layout in either a row or column format, otherwise known as the single dimensional arrangement, and this makes it useful for creating responsive designs. Okay, let's look at the relationship between the Flexbox containers and that of their flex items. Okay, now the flex container is the parent element that applies the Flexbox layout to its children, in this case the flex items here. Okay, so we have a flex container and then we have the flex items, and it is created by setting the display property of your Flexbox container to flex. Okay, and this flex containers has a main and a cross axis, and on the main axis of the flex container is determined by the flex property called flex direction. Okay, so we have the main axis, which is by default a row, and then we also have the cross axis. Okay, now when we look at the flex items, these are the direct children of the flex container, and these flex items are laid out and aligned according to the Flexbox rules applied on the flex container. Okay, so it's only the immediate children of the flex containers that are treated as flex items. So you can see here, so these are flex container, and it is only these immediate elements that we have the class of items that are treated as flex containers. Okay, these flex items can either grow, shrink, or stay fixed in size. Okay, and this is dependent on the availability of space and their assigned properties. Okay, now each items can override the alignment rules using an align self. So if we define a different class for this individual flex items, then we can align them, in which case they will disregard the CSS or the Flexbox rules that have been assigned to this flex container and then take on their own. So if we assign a flex self to one of these flex items, then it will take those flex rules and then disregard whatever was passed into the flex container. Okay, at this point let's get into our text editor, and what we're going to do is just practice whatever we have presented here in slides. We will look at both Flexbox properties, those that are applied to your flex container, as well as your flex items. Okay, so at this point I'll open my text editor side by side with my browser, and we are just going to write some basic HTML, and then we'll style it in CSS so that you have the practical experience. All right, so right here I have my text editor open side by side with my browser, and when we look at our folder structure, all we have here is an index.html file, and then our CSS folder where we'll be writing all of our styling. Okay, so I might as well just create a styles.css right here. And right here in our index.html, let's spin up a basic HTML page. So tab, and then we have our HTML templates generated. Okay, let's just link to our CSS quickly. So we have style is right here, css/styles.css. Okay, so now we've connected our HTML with our CSS, and then right here we are just going to kind of lay out our flexbox container with the flex items. Okay, so what we have is a div with the class of container. That will be our flex container, and then right inside that div, okay, so this is our parent element, and then we can add other divs as the child or children. Okay, all right, so I'm just going to have a div inside the parent element with a class of item. So I'm going to type that in, item, and let me duplicate this 3 times. We are going to have 3 child items in the div. Okay, and those will all have the class of item, and I'm just going to give it the values of 1, 2, and 3. And if we save, let's open our page up in live server, and then all we have is 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so we have our flex container. We already spoke about the flex container, and then the children. Okay, so what we are going to do now is to get into our CSS and begin to style, so that you kind of see how Flexbox makes this flex container as well as the flex elements behave. All right, so once we are done laying out our HTML page, the next thing we are going to look at is laying out our page in CSS, okay, with Flexbox. Now, in the earlier sections of the video, we look at some key concepts in Flexbox, and we looked at one of the very key concepts, which is the flex container. And in the slides, I explained that the flex container is the parent element where the Flexbox is applied. Okay, now this is defined in CSS using the display property, and then we set that value to flex. Okay, so right here in our CSS, if you access the class of container, and then we set that to display and then flex, now we have set our parent element to display flex. Okay, so as you can see the effect right here. All right, our elements are displaying correctly. Okay, now what I'm going to do here after we have displayed our elements to flex is to give our container a border. So just so that you see that we are working within that parent container. Okay, so let's give it a border, and let's give it a 1 pixel solid, let's say blue border, and this is the hex value I have here, 122 2ab. Okay, yes, so that is our value. Now as you can see, all of our flex items are within this container right here. What I'm going to do next is to style the flex items, okay, which are the children of the parent container class. Okay, so first of all, let's access the div with the class of item. So we have item, and what I'm going to do is give it a background, and let's give this a background of 4 CAF50. Okay, now let's give it the color of white so that we can see them right there. So we have a color of white. FFF is a hex value for white, and then let's give it a padding of 20 pixels here. Okay, so we have to give it a padding of 20 pixels. All right, so now it's displaying well. And let's separate the individual flex items with a margin. So we'll give them a margin of, let's say, 5 pixels each. Okay, all right, so now our flex items are displaying correctly. What I'm going to do now here is to continue to add the flex properties onto the container. Okay, so the container right here is where we'll be writing our flex properties. Okay, so now that we have set our background, you can see the outline of the container that we are working in. Let's look at one of the CSS property used in Flexbox, which is justify content. Okay, now justify content has some CSS properties or CSS values that are passed into it. Okay, so we have end, start, center, and space around, as well as space between. Okay, so by default your Flexbox justify content is set to start. That is, your elements are on the start of the container, and justify content pertain to the main axis. Okay, so this is the horizontal. Okay, this horizontal axis. So if you set to center, you have it placed in the center. So let's just do that, and then you see that your flex items have been moved to the middle of your container. Is the same with end, it will be moved to the end of the container. Okay, I'll show you in a few minutes how this the relationship between the flex or justify content, as well as align items, and then the flex direction, because as we are applying end, center, and that of start, and then we see that our items are moving horizontally on this page, it's going to behave differently when we have our align self, and just not that we just have the align self, but when we apply a flex direction to both of justify content and align self, we see that our page begins to behave very differently. Okay, so we'll get into that, and we'll kind of see how these three elements, justify content, align self, and that of align items, and that of the flex direction kind of work. Okay, so justify content, it pertains to the main axis. We move our items across the horizontal axis, and the next thing is we have align items. Okay, now let's go ahead and put an end to this. Now you are not really seeing the effect, but let's see. Let's give this a height of 400 pixels so you kind of see what I'm talking about. Now in this particular case, our align self is pertaining to the vertical axis. Okay, so we have the top, the middle, and that of the bottom. So so right now it's on end, so if I set that to the center, now our page is aligned vertically to the center of the whole container of 400 pixels. Okay, and if we send it to start, now it's on the very top. Okay, if we change our justify content to the start, okay, now you realize that this is on the start, so this is the start, and then we are aligning it to the start, so we are basically not seeing the difference here. Okay, because it's the same thing. Okay, but if we move it to the center, now it's on the center but at the start of our vertical axis, as you can see. So this is the center of the horizontal axis, but it is the start of the vertical axis. Okay, so if we set that to center, you should see it on the middle, you should see it in the middle of our container right here. Okay, so this is the center when we are going otherwise in the horizontal direction, and if we are coming from top to bottom too, we have that in the center. Okay, now the moment I've been waiting for is when we set a flex direction on this particular container, our align items and justify content will begin to behave differently. Okay, so as up to this point, our justify content pertains to the horizontal, and that of our align self is on the cross axis, which is the vertical axis. Okay, now if we add a flex direction, I'm just going to leave everything as it is, and now the flex direction takes some values. Okay, and these values are either the columns or the rows. So we have column or rows, and we also have row reverse and that of column reverse. Okay, so if we set this flex direction to column, now in this case, both of our justify content and align items are set to the center. So we have that of our items vertically arranged or arranged in block in our center. Okay, now let's set this to the end, and then you realize that now our align items is no longer moving in the vertical axis, but it's now moving in the horizontal direction. Okay, so we had it right here, and then it moves to the right or the left. Now let's move it to start, and let's see. All right, so it moves from the end right here to the start position. Okay, so now at this point, after we set our flex direction to column, our align self property or our align items property now works on the horizontal direction. Okay, and if we want to move it in the vertical direction, so let's set the justify content to end, and then you see that now we are moving vertically. Okay, so this is the end of in terms of our vertical axis, and this is the start. So if we move to start, oh, that's not start, so we have start. You realize that now we are on the top of our, so now it's both on the start. Okay, so it's the start of our vertical axis as well as the start on our horizontal axis, and in this case our align self is working as the horizontal axis, and that of our justify content is on the what vertical axis. I'm kind of confused here, but yeah, so if you continue to play with it, you kind of see the relationship between these two CSS properties. Okay, now they behave differently based on the flex direction that you set. Okay, now let's look at row. Now if we set it to row, justify content will still behave normally in the horizontal axis, and that of the align self will behave normally in the vertical axis. Okay, so right now they are all set to start, but if we send this to center, we'll move to the bottom here. We are moving across the vertical axis. If we set this to center, we will be moving towards the horizontal axis. So now we are moving in this the cross axis, or I don't know. Yes, so yeah, I hope I was able to establish some of the relationship that we have between both the justify content CSS property and the align items property in relation to the flex directions that you set it and how it will behave in that regard. Okay, yes, so let's look at the, so we have row, that's what you are seeing, and then we have column right here if we set that to flex direction, and then we have column reverse. Okay, so this will just reverse the elements. So we had 1 2 3, and now we have 3 2 and 1. It's just the same with row reverse, it just reverses. So we have row right here, and then if we set that to row reverse, now we'll have 3 2 1 in the horizontal plane. Okay, I hope this explanation on justify content, align items, and that of the flex direction made sense. Okay, now CSS or flex properties are applied to the main container elements. Okay, now what happens is that all these items are mandated to take the stylings that are applied to this flexbox item. Okay, however, each of these flex items could take in different flex properties. Okay, and in order to do that, you have to give this either an ID or a class on each of these items, and then you can apply different flex properties on them. Okay, this flex property that we are going to use on them is called the align self. Okay, now to do this align self, it takes in the start, the end, and then I think the center as well. So what you will do to align self, okay, is to kind of go back to your CSS or your HTML here, and then give individual classes to each of them. Okay, so let's just call them item 1. I'm just going to give them these names, and let's give this another class of item 2, and item 3. Okay, now you can use the end child property here in CSS to kind of access 1 2 and 3, but in this case I just decided to just give them different classes all together and do the styling. Okay, but if you want to use the end child, that kind of CSS is fine. Okay, okay, so now if we access each of those classes that we passed into our child element, okay, so I'm going to access item 1. It's called item 1, and what I'm going to do is to set is align self. We are going to align this self to, let's say, end. Okay, so we want to set this to the to be aligned to itself to end. Okay, now note that this still applies. Okay, so whether it's on end or it's on start depends on the relationship that we have here with both the row and the column. Okay, or the justify content, align self, as well as its flex direction. Okay, now if we change this to column, that should behave differently now. Okay, so you have to understand the relationship between this flex direction, justify content, and align self. You realize that now after we change it to column, now and that was right here arranged in the vertical direction is now being moved to the horizontal because we are using column. Okay, yes, so if you want to align each of the elements, you can then override these flex properties that were assigned to that particular child element by using the align self. Okay, so all you have to do is to give it a different class, and then so I'm just going to duplicate that, and let's give this item 2. Now we have the 2 items at end. I'm just going to use start here. Okay, now we have one on the start, one on the end. I don't know when you used it, but if you are laying out your page and you have to put some items just around like this, you can use that align self property. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is to get rid of align self. So I'm just going to comment that out so that you have it, and I'm going to increase the padding. Let me change this to row. So we display that to row, and let's see, let's give this a padding of 50 pixels. I want to make this larger a bit so that I see what that is. Okay, now let's check. Because we have a flex property known as flex wrap. Okay, so I wanted to get our flex items as large as possible so that we kind of use the flex wrap property here on them. So I'm going to set that to 100 pixels. Yeah, and I think we have a much larger flex items right here. Okay, now what you are seeing here is our flex items, but as you can see, they do not wrap. Okay, so what we're going to do here is to set the flex wrap to wrap. Okay, now what that means is that now anytime the screen size changes, they will also adjust. Okay, so as you can see, you see it takes up the space that is available. As our screen begins to go smaller, they kind of readjust and then arrange itself to match the remaining space. Okay, so that's a very important thing to note, so that when you are laying out your page for mobile responsiveness, you need to use this flex wrap so that you just have your whether it's text or it's square boxes like this, you need them to wrap with changing screen sizes. Okay, all right, so right after our flex wrap CSS property, let's look at other properties that we can assign to the flex items that can override the styling that have been like passed in our main flex container. Okay, so I'm just going to comment this out once more, and let's send our padding back to 20 pixels. I think it was 20 pixels padding, and let me just refresh. Oh man, everything is scattered right here, and I'm going to get rid of this flex align self element that was passed into the flex items. Okay, now what we are going to look at is the flex basis. Okay, and this is another CSS property that allows you to increase the width of one flex items and have it take in a different width compared to the other flex items. Okay, so with the individual flex items that we added the classes, if we add a flex basis, okay, so we have flex dash basis. I think this is the right one, and if we set this to any pixels at all, let's say we set it to 20 pixels, Now you see that our first flex item grows a little bit. Okay, now you might have not spotted that, so let me just put 30. Okay, now as you can see, this flex item grew by 30 pixels. Okay, so that is another property that we can use to override kind of the this width that was passed into the flex item. Okay, and now we can also select or give a flex basis to the second item, and let's set that to 50. And as you can see, this is 50 pixels in terms of width. Okay, so we can individually define the width of these flex items without the other one being affected. Okay, yes. So another one is flex grow. Now flex grow defines how much a flex item will grow relative to other flex items within the same flex container. Okay, how these flex items will grow relative to other flex items is assigned. Okay, so depending on the space available, these flex items will grow in different sizes relative to one another. Okay, so this is controlled, or this controls how the extra space is distributed among the flex items. Okay, so if we set a flex grow property on that particular flex item, okay, let's say we set a flex grow of 0, that means that by a particular flex item will not grow even if there's extra space in the container. Okay, but if we let's say put a flex grow here, it's called flex grow, and then we set this to 1, what happens is, okay, or what is happening is this item will grow to take up an equal share of the available space. Okay, so as you can see, so this space that was available, it takes up that equal amount of space that was available. Okay, now if we set another flex grow to 2, let's do that. If we set another flex grow to 2, okay, this will grow twice as much as this flex grow property that was added here. It will be proportionally more based on the flex grow factor on the other elements. Okay, so if we set this to flex does grow and we set that to 2, now you realize that now our flex item number 2 grows twice as much of flex item number 1. Okay, yes, so you can use this in styling to kind of set different properties for the individual flex items that you have. Okay, now if you want to set the rate at which they shrink, okay, we will have the flex shrink on any of these flex items. So we have flex shrink, I think it's right here, and let's set that to, let's say 1. You realize that once we closes it, this flex item number 1 shrinks, but you realize that our flex item number 2 just maintains its size. Okay, we have kind of a shorthand for this flex shrink, flex grow, and that of the flex basis. Okay, so if we pass in, let me just get rid of this so that when we pass that in, you kind of see the effect. Let's get rid of this. So if we pass in a flex, just flex, this will take in the flex grow property, flex shrink, and that of the flex basis. Okay, so assuming on my flex item number 2, I want to make it a flex grow of 1, and I don't want this to shrink, so I'll pass in 0, but I want the 2 to grow 100 pixels. Okay, so now you can see we have a flex grow of 1 on a flex item 2, a shrink of 0, that means it should not shrink, it will maintain its size, and that of 100 pixels, okay, on the flex basis. Okay, that is this one here. Okay, so yeah, if we maximize our screen there, you see that all of our flex items maintain their size, but this grows 100, this grows to take up the space that is available for it. And when we go on shrink, all others maintain, and then this doesn't really shrink. Okay, so it just maintains its size, but when it comes to flex growing, it grows to fit the remaining space that is available for it to grow. Okay, yes, so that is it for flex grow, flex shrink, and the shorthand way in which this can be written If we copy this, let's just try it by adding that same styling to item 1, and now what we have is equal size because the properties passed into item 1 and item 2 are the same. If we change this to 2, this will take in twice as much size as this. So as you can see, this shrinks right there, and then this now takes twice the size of that. Okay, and 1 now takes twice the size of 2. If we set the flex shrink to 1, okay, now that will shrink. Okay, as we expand, okay, they both grow, but once we reduce the size, that one remains the same and this shrinks. Okay, yes, and then you can even set different pixels rate for the individual flex items that we have. Okay, all right, so now we've come to the end of this particular tutorial where we lay the foundation or the fundamental concepts in Flexbox, and we'll make a follow-up tutorial where we lay out a web page and use the concept of Flexbox that we learned in this particular tutorial. Okay, so if you enjoy concepts like this, or you want to learn more concepts in web development, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and other technologies as I've done in the past with cPanel tutorials, please consider subscribing to the channel, hit the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and make sure you leave a comment in the comment section. If you have any contribution to the tutorial, please let me know in the comment section, and let's continue to learn together.